YouTube and share this to the community as well. Um, so listen, family, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the culture that I wanted to speak on. And sometimes I try to type it and it just so many thoughts come to my mind all at once for me to get to it. We're in a very interesting space. And so conflict is going to happen. It's July. We're in the peak maximum cycle of solar energy. Why do I mention that? Because it's scientifically shown that every 11 years, when the sun reaches a max peak, it's a conflict cycle. It's a cycle to where, right, more people are irritated because it's throwing off the balance, right, of their cerebral brain fluid, their consciousness. They're getting less sleep. It's increasing heart palpitations. So you're going to see problems arise. And I've been speaking upon this for the last 2 years now, specifically about solar cycles, and we're in it. What we've seen is this conflict between the young and the old, and we're going to see clashes of worlds happen, right? We've seen where they saying that the Epstein list shows up blank, basically, that there was no wrongdoing. He wasn't trying to blackball nobody, and there wasn't no girls. So let me dive into this a little bit. Because first, I want to talk about this Essence Festival. And before we get to that, you have to understand the essence of the time that we're living in and why this matters. Essence is a cultural statement, right? It's a space to where it's right there in the heart of New Orleans, right? Where there's so much black magic, quite literally, right? And people are used to going to Essence to get that vibe of the culture, where the spirit of culture feels alive. They get immersed in it. And so that is part of the brand value. It's authenticity, right? Now, Essence has been bought out by a guy named Richard Lou Dennis, right? Richard Lou Dennis is an advocate capitalist, black capitalist from Liberia. And so, he's of course going to have changes in the way that he operates and do things. He hired a CEO, which is an African woman who is part of the LGBT community. And I only say that because they may matter in how she makes decisions, right? I don't even believe she has a black wife. But again, I digress from that particular point. Now, a lot of people were complaining online saying that, listen, we believe that this is not as black as it used to be, right? We believe that it's being co-opted, and essentially you're trying to make it a space for everybody. But they're saying that in a way to saying that Africans have taken over, and it has been less about black culture, right? And it has been more just about the entire diaspora. Now, in a time where people are looking for their identity, people are looking for safe spaces. And if we don't have a space that feels safe, right, then we feel alone and it provokes fear. And so those safe spaces are spaces that feel familiar. So when we see our culture being celebrated, pictures of us, nostalgia of us, then it feels familiar, right? And we feel safe. So it's almost like cultural patriotism, right? To the memory of our culture and the core of what it means. Because during this time, we're supposed to be going through a renaissance. A renaissance is a rebirth of culture, right? To where we see more of it, not less of it. But let me tell you what happened on the back end. When they re-rolled back DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? They got a lot of money for it being women based, for it being LGBT based, and of course for it being minority owned business, right? And so there was a lot of sponsorship that came out of the George Floyd thing. This administration of MAGA is scaring the hell out of people. So what they're doing is they have to take a step back because black media has been controlled by white ad dollars and sponsorship. It cannot exist on its own. They don't have any models of independence. So when they're afraid, they're trying to figure out how do we keep this thing going? How do we keep the business going? How do we continue to employ people? How can we get this thing going another year? So they have to bow down. The problem is that consumers, 62% of consumers say that, you know, they want brands that stand up for their values when they challenged. So when your brand is challenged in a time like this and you stand down, you lose consumers because you create an alignment. So when the consumers are unaligned, it gives an opportunity for somebody else to align with them and steal your base. And the problem is you may never get those consumers again because they remember how you made them feel, right? Sometimes you only get one misstep. So this could have been a year where Essence really took a sacrifice, right? And saying that we're going to stand on business. We're going to stand for our values. We're going to make this bigger and blacker than ever, regardless. And that would have been a time where the culture came together right? And I believe that Richard Lue could have called up some of his friends and said, I need you all to help me out. But that can only happen if you truly stand for the values, right? In the essence of that culture itself. But if those values are loose and you're doing this as a business and you're a capitalist, then of course you're not going to make them kind of sacrifices because you want to go along and get along. And so this is what you're going to see with a lot of these brands this year. They're going to go along to get along and they're going to bow down. Their blackness only happens when it's safe to be, right? When resistance is and revolution is popular and it's the populism thing to do, then they do it, which is not resistance or radical at all. It's just going with the popular thing that you allowed to do, right? So this is why this year you've seen them fall. And then, of course, they had a multi-year contract with Target. That's divided the culture even further. Again, values being challenged, and they stood down. Now they had a multi-year contract, which means they would have had to breach a contract, and that breach of contract would have made them lose money, and they would have lose one of their biggest sponsors at a time where Target needs them the most, and they need Target the most, right? Now, the the activists decided to go at Target. Now, this is where I have a difference in opinion on how this particular movement is shaping out because I'm not sure if it's going to be something that unites the culture or divides the culture, or if it will have any real cultural impact, right, and benefit in the long run. Because essentially, Target is trying to wait them out and starve them out. You feel me? And so we've seen that in the likes of them calling in Kai Cenat, saying, Kai, we're going to have give you main product space and we're going to put it on our shelves, right? And these are young black men and they're most likely disconnected from the church and the activism, right? Like a lot of us are. So they saying, man, F that, let's go for our opportunity. Now, the reason I think that, not that Kai and them can't make their own decisions, especially when it's like somebody like Jamal Bryant, who they probably don't care about, right? That's leading the charge, or like an Al Sharpton. Because if I'm them, probably would be like, yeah, F them as well. Let's go get our money, right? And the reason I say that is because what have they done for me lately and why would I care, right? There's a complete disconnection between the elder generation and the younger. We seen Gilly get on camera talking to Joey Badass and saying that he ain't opened up the doors for no young cats. He go compete with them instead. Black community, when it comes to black men, there was a Harvard study that shows that black men rarely get mentorship and or sponsorship, right? So there's rarely doors open because the black men typically don't reach back and reach up. They try to compete and say this is our time now instead of yours. Just this fear that kind of goes back into, right, the father and the son almost, right? This fear of one generation taking over the next and making you feel useless instead of operating from this space of let me empower you. Similar to how like rich white men go get them a Charlie Kirk and they push their nationalism and their populist agendas all on college campuses, right? They get behind their thought leaders and they give them money to help spread their campaigns. How you think these guys are out there every single day? But we don't have anybody like that in the culture, right? Believe me, if we did, I think I would know. I think they would have tapped into me. My brother Kush, you're 100% correct. It is called the Kronos complex, or some people refer to as the Kronos syndrome, right? So now I can see, and I put out the message. I like the way that Kai Sanat and them unite. I like the way they collaborate. I like the way they build together. But what I do see that is I don't want to see corporate brands using them to go against their own culture. So that's when they can make decisions that have guidance and a big brother like myself to get them some game on what's the best ways to go about this because you don't want to become a corporate mascot, right? Where they pity you against your own people to fracture, right? Movements. If you have a belief about this movement and it's a part of your values and you are against it because of some real true belief, then yes. But if it's just for money, then no. Because short term, you may win, long term, you can lose a lot of people and lose a lot of respect, right? And you can lose a lot of connections later on. Who knows? The game is shaping up in an interesting way because them young boys have a lot of power, power of influence. So they can influence the next generation and say, man, F Target. And that power is worth billions of dollars because they could affect the stock in a way, right, that Jamal Bryant and the rest of them could never, right? So if they were in line with it, they actually would have a lot of power and they probably didn't realize